Welcome to Finding Certainty with your host and U.S. Army veteran, Patrick Laing. Over the next hour, you'll learn from Patrick and his expert guests how to attract more certainty into your business and your life. Now, here is your host, Patrick Laing.
Welcome to Finding Certainty, everyone. Thanks for being with me this morning. It's my favorite day of the week, as I always say. I look forward to either interviewing the guests that we have here on Finding Certainty or sharing with you my thoughts on the first Wednesday of each month. Today is April Fool's Day. It's always a bit of a kind of a joke day and gag day. We play tricks on each other, but it's no trick. Today is my monologue, and I've been looking forward all year to sharing this message with you. You know, last month I spoke about revelation, just about being guided in all that we do, and we talked about several ways, right, to become more and more in tune, to develop this talent and this skill that can really be so very beneficial in our lives. And there's a lot of ways to do that, right? We do this by being pure and honest and reliable. I think we develop this skill by being kind. Really, this principle of revelation in our lives is woven through many of the principles that we have discussed in these monologues over the last couple of years. I think we can be guided in all of them and in all that we do, and it really can add in a level of comfort and richness and certainty in our daily lives. It is unparalleled. That's why I chose it as R is for Revelation last month. What's interesting is that the principle today is also one that is woven through all of these principles, all of these characteristics of certainty. You know, I decided to start doing these monologues because I had a lot more I wanted to say. You know, during an interview, I visit with the guests, we chat back and forth, and I ask questions, and I'll share my thoughts, you know, maybe just a comment here or an insight there. But it is somewhat limited because the guest does most of the talking, and I find myself just wanting to say more, right? I find myself wanting to add more insight and share more of my own experience. That's why I started this. I've been doing it now for a couple of years, been working through the alphabet. Had a bit of a gap at the end of this last year due to some travel and so forth that was going on. But long story short, these monologues are they're really meaningful to me. They're really important. I think I'm teaching principles and lessons and discussing these characteristics that if someone will adopt them in their lives, it will absolutely transform your life. And today's principle is no exception. It's not isolated, right? These principles are not independent from each other. They're really woven together like a tapestry of certainty. Today's principle is very much the same. It's woven through all of the different themes we've discussed. It's also a characteristic of some of the greatest leaders, influencers, and icons throughout history. I've talked about many examples here on my show, like Abraham Lincoln, Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, and others. In fact, the month before last, I spoke about confidence. I decided to speak on quiet confidence. Q is for quiet confidence. And I shared examples of many leaders throughout history that demonstrated those principles throughout their lives. Well, they demonstrated today's principle as well. The greatest example in every case is, of course, our Savior Jesus Christ. He was the perfect example of every strength, of every characteristic, of every leadership quality and certainty quality that I can think of. And today's subject is no exception. Today I wanted to talk about S is for service. looking over my own life, I've had many great examples, right, of servant leaders that have inspired me and impacted me. Some of the richest examples that I've learned from. I think of people like the employer I had. His name was Howard Bybee when I worked for the BYU library as a college student many years ago, some 40 years ago. He was an extraordinary example of service, not just to us as his employees. He taught us a lot. I still remember him telling me to stop using the word like. Right? That was it was one of his pet peeves when we say things like, well, it's like, we inserted this word like into our language. We'd use it many times as kids, and he's like, oh, he said, that is not helping you. He taught me to be more articulate, to be more precise and more decisive in my language. He also taught me, though, how to serve others in ways that I'd experienced, I'd considered it, I'd even done it in ways as a missionary from my church and serving in the National Guard and so forth and so on. But he taught me that service doesn't have to be big, grandiose, philanthropic projects. It can also be in the smallest actions. Right? It could be picking something off the ground and putting it in the garbage that you notice that maybe nobody else notices. Maybe it doesn't change history. It doesn't it disrupt or impact the evolution of time. But it's a little thing. And what he taught me was that those little things add up to bigger things. They add up to character. They add up to impact. They can even add up to legacy. And he's one of those examples that I remember. I had another boss when I lived in Anchorage, Alaska. I worked for a company called Klondike Advertising. And it's interesting because the owner, his name was Rocky Brew, owned a very large petroleum company called Inlet Petroleum, from which he made millions of dollars. And then he had this little specialty advertising agency called Klondike Advertising, and that's where I worked. I think in many respects it was his outlet, right? Kind of his creative outlet. He didn't need the money. He certainly didn't need to manage more employees and have a small little business that, we did okay, but we weren't turning any heads, weren't making anyone rich. But I think he did it not just because of his desire to have a creative outlet. I mean, how interesting is petroleum, right? But I also believe, and I base this off comments he made and things I saw, that he loved serving his community. His petroleum company, he was selling oil all over the country and around the world, I suppose. But it wasn't affecting his neighbors. It wasn't affecting Anchorage. It wasn't affecting the schools and the post office and other things. The post office was actually one of our biggest customers. You wouldn't think so, but they bought a lot of mugs and a lot of hats and a lot of pens and other things. But I really think, and I heard him say this, how much he enjoyed serving his community, making a difference in his community. As I look at examples like Howard and Rocky and others that I've had throughout my life, I can't help but think that these were examples I wanted to model my life after. Talk about Christ. I'm going to talk about him in more detail later, but having examples, servant leaders that you model your life after, these can really add a level of richness and depth and maturity to your life that I think is unparalleled. It's not just individuals, right? It can be systems, it can be organizations, cultures. I mean, our company as a whole, Certainty Management, it's really important to us that this is a part of who we are, of our collective experience. We call ourselves, our family of companies, the Certainty Collective. And this desire to serve, to make a difference, is woven through what we do. It's woven into our tapestry as a company and as a team. I say all the time, we want to make an income, but we don't just want to make an income. We want to make a difference. We don't just want to do business, but we want to do good. That's always been our mission, right? It's something I longed to have built into my day-to-day work. I couldn't find it out there consistently, and so I went out and built it. I say that there are three legs to the stool, if you will, of our certainty ecosystem. First, there's our culture. We're a faith-based, family-focused company. And that culture, that's positive, uplifting culture. There's no contention to speak of. There's no politics. There's no, even competition. Sure, there's competition, but it's positive. This culture is a really big part of who we are. Secondly, we have an unparalleled opportunity. We refer to ourselves as the best sales job in town. And I think people are attracted to what we're doing, the culture, the opportunity. I mean, we have multiple reps this year who will earn 7 digits. And that's unparalleled. I've never seen that in my career. But lastly, the third leg of the stool is that we wanted to make a difference, right? I think you need to have all three. You need culture, you need opportunity, and you need service if you truly want to become the person and the organization that you long to be. This is a big theme for me. It's a big hot button or soapbox, if you will. When those three are aligned, that's when things start to work in a very powerful way. In fact, it wasn't until we really started doing that and started talking about it and proactively incorporating it into our company that we really took off. In fact, when we started out, we started in 2019, and during the pandemic, we starved. I mean, we weren't making any money for the first couple of years, and we started making a little. We started building a name for ourselves, started building our team, building our offerings, our suite of services, and establishing our brand. And we started making a little bit of money. But I distinctly remember the day I had this idea come that we could use what we're good at. We're a cost reduction firm, an efficiency firm. I said we could use what we're good at to help nonprofits raise unlimited funding. See, we believe that there are millions of dollars out there hiding. We know how to find them through tax credit recovery or cost reduction or renegotiating contracts or whatever the case might be. But there are millions of dollars hiding. We know how to find them. We know how to help our clients find their share, and that's what we do. But I said, imagine if we could do that and donate 50% of the commissions on our jobs to the nonprofits in our communities. If they refer us to someone, we will donate 50%. I've never seen anything like it, right? I said, if we could do that, imagine the good we could do, right? It's truly win-win. We get more customers. The customers get our help. They get the lion's share of what's recovered, but a portion would go back to these extraordinary organizations within our communities that are doing such good, right? And they are doing good. They're helping kids with scholarships, coaching, fighting fighting trafficking. They're saving the planet. The list goes on, right? And I believe that the more funding they had, the more good they could do. Well, it's still in a very real sense an idea for us. We're just getting it started now. It's taken time to develop and establish how it worked and create the documentation and so forth and so on. But it's founded in principles that we've been doing for years. We've recovered and seen over $150 million saved for our clients in just one of our divisions, right? It's the most boring product you can think of, too. It's helping customers cut their printer and copier contracts by 30 to 60%. It can be millions and millions of dollars that we recover for them and put back in their pockets. So anyway, I digress. But So I'm a firm believer that if you want to incorporate service into your work and into your culture, into your ecosystem, make it a part of who you are, you have to proactively go do that. We've done exactly that. We created our Certainty Partners program, which is the program we've designed and are launching to help nonprofits raise funding, zero cost to them, right? We started what we call the Certainty Fellowship. Again, this is a new program. It's an idea to help create a paid internship for students so they can graduate to college, attend college in the first place and pay for it, but also graduate debt-free. We have a program called Student Optimum Services where we can help any former college student who has federal student debt to eliminate that debt and do so with zero cost to them, right? Zero out-of-pocket cost. I mean, they're going to save far more than it costs. There's a fee, but so we're helping students go to school, helping them graduate debt-free, and if they didn't, helping them eliminate their federal student debt. They just have to be out of school and have at least $25,000 in debt, and we can help them eliminate it. Our partner in that space has eliminated $250 million in debt, gotten it forgiven, or at least it's on track to be forgiven. I mean, what a great service, right? For anyone out there who's trying to go to college. We partnered with a company called Remote Care Today that is helping seniors access just an extraordinary brain health platform called Brain Health Plus. It is proven to reverse cognitive decline, to help with service, to help with memory, with balance, with cognition. It was written up by the Alzheimer's Association in a 2-year study, and they literally came out and said, this doesn't just slow down decline, it will reverse it. I mean, what an extraordinary service. Okay, so I'm going to get off my soapbox, but my point is that if you want to incorporate this principle into your business and into your life, you have to, one, choose to do so, be proactive, think outside the box, and you have to collaborate with others to make it happen. It doesn't just happen on its own. Most recently, we are launching a new program called Certainty Veterans, and we're not doing it on our own. We're partnering with another company and an epic organization here in Las Vegas, Nevada, called American Veterans Assist. They help veterans access their benefits and their back pay. He just showed me that the owner, Evan Brandon, just showed me a testimonial or a review that one of his clients had shared. Just talked about how he's changed his life. I mean, he got back tens of thousands of dollars. It's close to $100,000 is my understanding in back pay. Has free medical for life, about $4,400 a month for life. Does not have to pay property tax anymore, and his children can go to college for free. I mean, talk about service, right? I'm going to talk a little bit more about military later today. But here's what's interesting. This can apply and should apply in any business, right? It's not industry specific. It is principle based. But it also should apply and can apply in anything we do. Even things that you wouldn't think of. I mean, lately our biggest focus as a company has been on what we can do for energy. We have a partnership with a company named S3 Energy Development, and we're producing power for AI data centers. In fact, I was invited to be a co-author on a book. I have a picture of it right here if you're looking at the video. It's called Empower AI. And it shows policymakers how to do AI and do it right? How to do it without raising rates, without fighting environmental litigation, without overwhelming the grid, et cetera, et cetera. Even in this space, there's a way to incorporate service into what we do. of this growing partnership, right? We're creating utility scale power for AI data centers, manufacturers, and anyone else running up against the bottleneck for power these days. But even in those conversations, we tell them there's what I like to say is there's three main benefits of working with this, what we call our trifecta. The first is time to power. Okay, we can get you power faster than anything else. Literally a gigawatt of power we can have up and running in 18 months. It's unheard of. We also will fund the entire thing. Our partner in this space, our sustainable energy provider, will fund the entire project. But then the third benefit is that it is carbon neutral. There is literally zero carbon emissions. And we use hydrogen, to be clear, but there's zero carbon emissions. That's the service piece, right? If we can produce the power quickly, help fund it, we can create what's called a power purchase agreement, a PPA. Customer just has to pay for the cost of the power on the back end. It's at utility scale or better. But if we can bless the planet as well, if we can serve our communities and the nation and the planet as a whole by creating carbon neutral power, zero carbon emissions, what a great service, right? And so even in something very technical, scientific, industrial scale energy, I don't know what's more scientific than that. Even there, we're incorporating a form of service into our work. And it's a big deal. There was a big data center in Provo, Utah, who wanted to come to town and was recently turned down, or at least it's on hold. I don't think it's dead yet, but it's definitely on hold because the city council did not want the emissions from their gas turbines. That was their big issue. We are hopefully getting involved in that project through a connection of ours and solving that problem for them. Through that service, we can solve their concern and make this development possible. It can bring billions of dollars to Utah Valley. It can create jobs and tax revenue and so forth, but do so without destroying the environment. At the surface, it sounds very technical, right? But underneath, it's still service. Service to businesses, service to infrastructure, service to the planet, et cetera, et cetera. So why does it matter, right? Why does service matter? We're going to go to a quick advertising break. When we come back, I'm going to answer that question. So thanks for being here with me. Don't go away. I appreciate you being here on Finding Certainty with me. I'll be right back.
Certainty Management can help create more certainty in your life with our deep discount health insurance options, even for 1099s, part-time employees, volunteers, and more. Pay less to protect yourself, your loved ones, and your team. Call 888-684-3122 for a free quote today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at CertaintyTeam.com. That's Certainty, T-E-A-M, like Mary.com.
If you're a nonprofit in need of funding, we can help. Certainty Management is a cost reduction firm that also helps churches, schools, sports teams, and other nonprofits raise unlimited zero-cost funding. Best of all, you don't have to sell anything or ask for donations. Call 888-684-3122 to learn more today. That's 888-684-3122. Visit us on the web at CertaintyTeam.com. That's Certainty, T-E-A-M, like Mary.com.
You are listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Laing.
I told you I'd be quick. Thanks for hanging out and spending your morning with me, or maybe afternoon, depending on where you are. This show is nationally syndicated. It's broadcast all over the country and even around the world. You can find it on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple and Google, and etc. So let's keep going. We've still got a lot to cover today, but let me ask you this question. Why do you think is service so important? Why does it show up everywhere? In religion, in leadership, in business, right? In even just in personal fulfillment. Why is it such an important and pervasive theme? Here are three reasons why I think we see this manifested or why this applies. The first reason is that it simply feels better, right? I mean, I know that sounds simple, but it's also or actually very profound. In my church, we have an opportunity to serve a full-time mission, a service mission for the church, and it's a 2-year mission. We actually volunteer to do it. We pay for it ourselves, or our loved ones, our family helps pay for it. Sometimes the church will help if it's a young missionary from a family who doesn't have those means, but it's volunteer. We pay for it. We don't choose where we go, and we go serve for 2 years. And it's incredible because it's actually the hardest thing I've ever done, but it's also the most incredible experience of my life. Most missionaries will tell you, if they went and did their best, that it was the best 2 years of their life. But why is that, right? I mean, if you think about it, it isn't easy. You're far from home. You're dealing with homesickness and maybe poor food and uncomfortable beds and different cultures and bugs and sometimes even dangerous environments, right? And yet repeatedly they say it was the most incredible experience of my life. So why would someone say that, right? Why would someone say that about something that's so hard? I think it's because maybe for the first time in their life, they're not looking inward, right? When you're serving in any capacity, it could be the Peace Corps, the military, or a service mission like I did. You're looking outward, right? You're focused on everyone except yourself. Most of our life, we're spent looking inward. Our problems, our friends, our schooling, right? Our career, our own stresses and worries. But when we stop and we look outward, when we forget ourselves, just like Christ taught, when we lose ourselves in the service of others, something magical happens. It's something that's very real. It's actually difficult to explain, but it's very real and it's very impactful. I don't care if you go for 2 years to Idaho or 2 weeks in Africa. I have friends in different religions, different churches that have served 2 weeks in Mexico or 2 weeks in Africa, building schools, building homes, or just maybe a Saturday picking weeds for a widow with some friends from church. People always walk away saying, that felt incredible. And it just doesn't make sense, right? You're tired, you're sore, maybe you've been rejected, and yet you say, it was incredible. And here's the paradox. It almost sounds a little selfish, right? Because you are the one who benefits. Even though you're giving service, you're giving your time, you're giving of your means, it comes back to you tenfold, 100-fold. It's this eternal principle I just can't really explain, but it's 100% true. And it's kind of a what came first, chicken or the egg question, right? I mean, do we serve because it feels good, or does it feel good because we serve, right? It almost sounds selfish. The more I serve, the better I feel, so I'm going to go serve more, but I don't know, but I do know this. It works. One of my favorite scriptures is in what we call the Doctrine and Covenants. It's a verse that talks about the worth of a soul. It says that if you labor all your days and bring back even one soul, how great shall be your joy. And what's interesting is that one soul is referring to your own, right? I mean, if you worked your entire life and served and tried to do what was right, obey the commandments, help others, and you never brought a single other person into the gospel, if you brought yourself, that would be okay. But the verse continues in the next verse and says, how much greater shall be your joy if you bring many. But you have to bring yourself first. It's kind of like that oxygen mask principle, right? You put your mask on first and then you help others. It's not selfish, it's strategic. And I've seen it play out in many areas of my life. It's a principle that applies in marriage, right? In fact, one of my favorite books is a book by Greg Bauer. What's his name? Greg Bauer, I believe. His name... The name of the book is Real Love. I'll have to look up the author's name. I think it's Greg Bauer or Scott Bauer. I can find it easily enough. But he talks about how before we can truly love another, you have to love yourself. Greg Baer, that's it. Greg Baer. Oh, phenomenal book. He talks about how so much of what we do with an agenda or ulterior motives. And when we forget that and we start doing things because they're right and we start putting ourselves first just to make sure that we are in the right place, and then we serve the other person with zero expectations. There's that word again, right? We serve the other. It comes back to us 100-fold. I won't go into more detail right now. We don't have time today, but you know, as our business has grown and we've spent years building it, one of the things that excites me most is not the money. It's what we can do with our company. It's what we can do with the success, do with the wealth. It's, you know, pay off debt, bless our loved ones, and go beyond our immediate circles and bless communities. Bless the world. I mean, I love seeing our salespeople be successful because I know the kind of people they are. I know they're going to pay it forward. They're going to flood it out into their churches and schools and communities. And I really believe that when you start doing that, whether it's in a marriage, a business, in our own, in some sort of service role, or in our own lives, it's kind of like heaven says, now I can trust you, right? Says, okay, now you get it. Took you a while, but now you get it. And when you understand that, everything changes. That's when the floodgates open. I talk to my reps a lot about having an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. I said, when you focus on yourself, the old WIFM, what's in it for me, right? You miss out on so much more. When you forget yourself and you look at the team, you look at how can I collaborate? How can I bless those around me? Serve, include, involve, build. You'd think it would be dividing up that pie and you're getting a smaller piece, but that's not how it works. I remember the whole animated movie, The Grinch Stole Christmas, if you remember, when he finally learns and at the end returns all the gifts he'd stolen and blesses the community, his heart grew bigger. Anybody who's a parent knows that, and I remember feeling like this when I had my second son. He was about to be born. I thought, man, I wonder if I'm going to have to divide the love I feel for my other children. I had 3 stepkids and 3 adopted children and 1 of my own. And I thought, am I going to have to divide my love? But you don't. It doesn't get split up. It just expands. This applies in a lot of areas. It applies in relationships and business, but it most definitely applies in service. You give and you give and you give, and yet you never run out. It just keeps coming back to you. I talked last month about how we can become someone that God can trust. You know, we talked about Revelation, how the more we listen, the more he speaks. He's always speaking, but are we hearing him? Are we responding? The more we do, the more he trusts us. We can become congregations and communities and organizations and individuals that he trusts. When we look outward and we stay ready and we listen and we act, and it sounds like a lot, right? But it's actually quite simple. But when we do this, the floodgates open up. If you're watching, you can see the board behind me, a little plaque that says the word prepared, and then above that it says, I am ready now. That's what I'm talking about. Being ready to serve, being ready to listen, ready to respond, right? And it's incredible because when you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. I mean, I've heard many people say, I just interviewed Bruce McRae just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he talked about that. He talked about how when you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. Same goes for service, right? It's fun, it's energizing, it's exhilarating. I learned something in college. I took a family science class, and it was about how our thoughts dictate our feelings. Many of our negative feelings are distorted, and they can change quickly when we shift our focus outward. We've all experienced where we were maybe exhausted. It's been a long day, we're getting ready for bed, and then a long-lost friend knocks on the door. And suddenly, we're wide awake for the next several hours talking. This is a principle, I think, that applies. It's changing our mindset, and it can change in an instant. When we're down or maybe depressed, dealing with an illness, a tragedy, a loss, financial setbacks, service is one of the fastest ways to feel better, because our problems don't necessarily disappear, but they do shrink. Why? In comparison, maybe it's perspective, but I think it's focus. I don't know exactly why this happens, but I do know that it happens. And I honestly believe that a person or a company or an organization can become what it's capable of becoming by serving. If you don't understand, if you're missing that third leg of the stool, your stool will fall over. You'll never become what you could without incorporating this principle into what you do. So that's the first principle. It feels great, but it also has extraordinary benefits and rewards that come with it. A second reason for service is service puts you in contact with the kind of people that you want to associate with. I talk about becoming servant leaders, right? Well, one of the best ways to do that is to associate with others who already live that way. I firmly believe that. It's one of the best ways to expand your network and meet really quality people. Now, I'm not personally a big network marketer. I'm more comfortable by myself than I am in a crowd. I mean, it's kind of funny because I'm in sales and leadership. I'm a speaker. I do my podcast, but I call myself an antisocial people person. But that being said, I'm not personally a big network marketer, but I love the energy of those people and those organizations. They're just incredible, right? They're excited, they're driven, they want to make money, sure, but they also want to make a difference. And most organizations out there are trying to work with some product or service. Maybe it's a nutritional or a financial product, but they're trying to help people. Some of the greatest servant leaders I've ever met come from that industry. I think of people like, and just shout out to Larry Laing and Mike Mazer, Patrick Sadivi, Eric Allen, Chris Freer, and my good friend Marlon Dubetz. Every one of these guys are servant leaders. They come from that industry. I've kind of been an observer of them more than anything, but I love how they live. And you do not succeed in that space or any space, in my opinion, without adopting a servant mindset. That's why these guys have done so well. They serve others. They're great leaders, but they serve and serve and serve. I see it in my own partners. Our COO, Victoria Foster, our VP of Admin and HR, Joe McCauley, my partners, Brian Pointer, Andy Tenney, Dan Park, Liz Deal, of course, Bill Gans and Kevin Winbauer of S3 Energy Development. These are servant leaders. My good friend and partner, Frank Hellring. He's the co-founder of Certainty Global, our technology company, and the host of Frankly Seniors. He's an incredible example of someone trying to serve others. He wants to serve the senior community. There's 13,000 a day turning 65 in America. That's literally filling Yankee Stadium every 3.5 days. And he's created a platform, a podcast called Frankly Seniors, designed to serve that often overlooked community. He calls them the forgotten generation. And what an admirable effort and work. So these are some of the finest servant leaders that I've known. And it makes everything better. It makes me better, our communities, our team, and the list goes on and on. I will make you this promise. If you want to feel better, more at peace, more inspired, more happy, if you want to live a full and rich life, service is the key. They say we are the sum of the 5 people we spend the most time with. And I don't know about you, but I would rather spend time with people who have a servant's heart. And I've tried to do that in my life. I talk about perspective, right? So often it's choosing how to view things, choosing to see things, choosing who to associate with, right? I'm so humbled and grateful for the team we've assembled at Certainty Management. We've intentionally recruited older salespeople and consultants. They're in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and even 80s because they have a lifetime of experience. They have broad networks. I think we have 3 people who are in their 20s or 30s, and everybody else is 50 and above. And I love that because they have perspective. They have work ethic. They understand service. I remember a funny story, though. There were 2 kids. They were raised in the same home, same environment, same opportunities. But one was optimistic and grateful for everything he had. He was positive, and the other wasn't. Right? He was kind of critical and selfish and negative. I don't know why one was the one way and the other was the other way. But so the parents actually hired a psychiatrist, and one day they ran a test. They put the negative child in one room, and it was filled with presents. I mean, every gift imaginable. And they left him there and said, okay, knock yourself out. This is all for you. They came back an hour later, and everything was torn apart. He'd opened all the presents. And guess what his response was? He said, this is the wrong color. This is the wrong size. I already have one of these. He was completely incapable of seeing the good. Again, I don't know why, but it was a habit, a characteristic that he had acquired. I think many of us view service the same way. We are focused on self. We don't feel like we have the time or the energy or maybe the interest to serve others. And we become that critical, selfish, self-centered person. And you know that these are very rarely people that are finding joy in their life. They put the optimistic child in a room full of manure. Maybe you've heard this story. Left him there and said, okay, knock yourself out. And he kind of looked at him like, oh. But they came back an hour later, and he was throwing it everywhere. He was laughing, he was digging, he was burrowing, hit piles. And they said, what are you doing? And he said simply, well, with all this, you know what, there must be a pony in here somewhere. That's perspective, right? That perspective should apply to service. It should apply to everything in our lives. It's choosing to see possibility. And it will change your life if you can adopt it. The third reason why I think service is so important is the ripple effects that it creates. First, I used to call it a ripple effect. You've heard me talk about this on my show. And then I started talking about it as a mushroom effect because I could see it growing. Right? The ripples didn't dissipate. They actually grew like a field of truffles, somewhere in the forests of Tuscany. When I lived in Italy, they actually used dogs to find truffles because they're hard to find, but they are very, very valuable, right? I then started calling it a snowball effect because I see it getting bigger and picking up speed. This service that we're giving, this company we're building. More recently, I refer to it as an avalanche because it's continuing to grow. It's continuing to accelerate. A snowball didn't seem big enough. I always say that 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 or even 3. When it's side by side, it's 11. It is expansive. It is multiplied. And there's this ripple effect, this avalanche effect. When intention meets alignment, and those meet action, something exponential happens. Service takes on a life of its own, right? It expands, it inspires, and very simply, people want to be a part of it. It attracts more and more of the same mindsets, the same people, the same opportunities. It gets bigger right before our eyes. That's one of the reasons why it's so important. I think if you want to accomplish anything good in life, you incorporate service into it. It's like infusing, rocket fuel or jet fuel into it. It burns at a higher rate. It picks up speed automatically. It grows exponentially. Those who don't figure this out, in my opinion, will never reach their full potential. But those who do, even in small ways, will see their efforts magnified. Christ, as I said, was the perfect example. There are 3 principles from his life that give us a roadmap, if you will. First, it wasn't just what he did. It was who he was. Right? It wasn't just an appendage. It coursed in and through everything he did and said. And I think that's an important principle. We shouldn't just try to serve occasionally or when the opportunity presents itself. It should be part of us. It's more like a tattoo than a watch or a bracelet. It's not just something we put on and take off. Service can be simple. It doesn't have to be grandiose. It doesn't have to be a big, enormous philanthropic project. Sure, we should do those too, but service can be simple. It could be a smile at a stranger. It could be a thank you, a nice tip for a waiter or waitress. It can be a phone call. It goes hand in hand with what I talked about last month about revelation, about being guided. So often opportunities to serve come to us as an impression, or they come to us as a thought or just an insight. And when we listen to those, we're able to serve someone. If a thought comes to me to call someone, I immediately pick up the phone and call if I'm able. I don't want to forget. And sometimes it was nothing. I don't know why I felt that impression. Other times it's clear. I've had situations where I called someone and they said, "I can't believe you called. I was literally considering suicide," or I was at a loss for what to do. I was desperate for help, and your phone call rang. I don't know how you did that, how you knew. Well, it's because I listened, right? The Lord knows who needs help. We are his instruments, right, of service. So often he blesses the lives of, our own lives and those of others through us. And so that's why I talk about becoming someone he can trust. Doesn't have to be grand, just has to be consistent. Second, he too, as perfect as he was, as extraordinary as he was, he learned and he grew. Even Christ grew line upon line, precept on precept, just as we can and should. And, he was a child, a young man, growing up into a teenager and eventually an adult. He had family. He worked. He didn't come from a family of means. He became a carpenter. We know that was some result, had to have been some result of years and years of lessons and instruction and training and support. He too learned and developed into the man that he became. Now, obviously, he had divine potential within him. I think he had greater understanding and greater insight than any of us do, but still, he became who he was. He wasn't just born that way. And so even if we don't feel like we're there yet, right, we got a long ways to go, right? We're all a work in progress. We all are figuring this out and getting better at serving and listening and leading and so forth and so on. But every one of us can do it if we try. Third, maybe the most important principle that he taught was to not give up, right? He never gave up. He experienced more opposition than any of us. And up into including his martyrdom, his crucifixion. He never gave up. He still kept going. And that doesn't mean it was easy, right? If you remember, if you're familiar with the verse in Gethsemane, the garden, where he sacrificed his life, he took on our sins and our maladies, our hurts and our pains. He took on every sin and hurt in history, what we call the atonement. It was so much pressure and pain that he bled from every pore. And at one point, we know that while he was divine, he was also human. He had his mother and his father in him, the divinity from his father, the humanity from his mother. We know that it was a lot. Because at one point he said, "Father, if thou be willing, remove this cup from me." He was saying, this is a lot, Father. Are you sure this is the only way? And yet, then he followed that up by saying, "Nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done." And in everything in our life, referring to service and personal revelation and discipline, accountability, all these principles I've been talking about throughout this series, right, over the last couple of years. Throughout all of it, it doesn't mean it's easy. On the contrary, it's hard. It takes effort. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of grit, if you will, and persistence. But just like he said, it's not thy will, or not my will, but thine be done. He was committed to do it whatever it took. That is commitment. That is service. Before I close, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge the time that I served in the Army with some of the greatest examples of service that I've ever experienced. I mean, we have extraordinary warrior heroes that serve our country and have served and even given the ultimate price and have done so for decades now, right? Almost 200 years. The time I spent in the service really, I think it affected me. Because service there, it's not theoretical, right? It's real. It's immediate. It is personal. I met some of the finest people I've ever known in the military. And it's interesting because you're in a family, a special, tight-knit community. And it's about brothers in arms, right? You have their back, they have your back. We are serving. We will give whatever price is required to serve our country and protect our liberties. It makes me sad when people don't truly understand that. I actually admire countries like Italy and Israel and others where they require every young person to serve at least a year or two in the military. I think it's valuable. You have a different understanding of national defense, right? The ones standing next to you and the ones who have your back, they become more than just brothers in arms. They become a part of your DNA. They become a part of your community, a part of your family, as I said, because you train together, you struggle together, you rely on each other, you serve together. Through that, I think you learn what service truly means. So whether you serve in the military or not, I really encourage you to look for ways to find that kind of network or that kind of community, whether it's in the church, the military, just by joining a nonprofit organization and serving and helping with their events. It's really important. Not only does it do good, but it changes you fundamentally, I believe. You truly learn what service means. You learn what putting the mission and the person next to you above yourself mean. And when you do that, it changes you. I think too often, many of the problems in our nation and in our world are because we are focused on self. And when we're focused outward and we're focused on each other and this higher purpose, this collective good, well, that's when incredible things can happen. And not only, again, does it do great good, but it becomes part of who you are, and it changes your perspective. As veterans, and you notice if you're watching the video, I'm wearing my veteran hat today. I even wore a camouflage shirt, which I don't usually do, but I did it as a nod to my brothers in arms. Next week, my guests, I'm excited about having Glenn Copeland and his friend Dave. They are commanders in the Military Order of Purple Heart. They will be on my show next week, and we'll be talking about their experiences and the principles of certainty that are illustrated therein. So I hope you'll join me next week and listen to their thoughts. Those who've served, they know that the real reward is the brotherhood, right? The growth and the purpose, but also the impact that they have. The service that they gave, it changes them and it changes many others in the process. We'll be talking about service, of course, next week. We're talking, I think, at a level that most people can't fully understand. I hope you join me. It's going to be a great conversation. The question becomes, in closing, are we that committed? Christ was the ultimate example. My friends who will be with us next week are incredible examples of service and commitment and sacrifice. But are we committed in our own small ways to our families, our jobs, our business, whatever the case might be? Because ultimately, service is not complicated. It is intentional. It feels better. Like I said, it attracts better people. It creates something bigger than ourselves. These are the rewards of service, if you will. Service is one of the greatest keys to certainty, not just in our lives, but in the lives of those around us. And that's why I wanted to talk about it briefly today. Maybe that's why across the country and across generations, we say, thank you for your service. I mean, what more can we say? I hope that we truly, appreciate it, but I hope even more so that we truly go out and experience it. It may be too late for you to go join the Army or the Air Force or the Marine Corps. Whenever I meet a veteran, I ask them, I say, do you know what it takes the average person to become a Marine? Or, fill in the blank. And they look at me and they say, in fact, this is a better question, I think, or even a better statement than thank you for your service. I always say, do you know what it takes for the average person to become a Marine or a Navy SEAL or an Army Ranger, whatever they did? They usually say something, service or work ethic, and I say, the average person will never be a Marine. They love that, right? It's a great way to give them a compliment. Then you can say, thank you for your service. But little tidbit from one veteran. I learned that from a friend, and I've always said it since. But, what more can we say, right? Service changes us. It can change those around us. It can change our communities. And if we truly understand that, it can change the world. I hope we'll do that. I hope you'll remember, again, to not just say thank you for your service, but go out and experience serving yourself. Let's go make a difference, right? Let's give service wherever we can. It'll change our lives. It'll change the lives of others. It will create more certainty in the world than anything else I know of. I always say certainty is out there. You can find it, and we can help. I appreciate you subscribing to our channel, liking, sharing, commenting. I think this is an important message. I hope we can get it out to as many people as possible. Please share it. And thanks for being with me today. I wish you the very best. Have a great rest of your week. And we'll keep marching on. I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Take care.
Thanks for tuning into today's episode of Finding Certainty. We hope you've gained some more insight into how to create more certainty in your own business or nonprofit. Join us next week for another taste of the Certainty Experience. Until then, we wish you greater certainty in all that you do.